Hey guys, picture this. March 29th, 1461, Palm Sunday, a blizzard's tearing across a muddy field in Yorkshire, and beneath that snow, the bodies of 28,000 men, more than died on the first day of the Somme. This is Towton, the bloodiest battle in British history, a fight so brutal it traumatized an entire nation. And here's the thing, most people have never even heard of it. Tonight we're going back to that frozen field to witness the day England tore itself apart. Alright, get comfortable, dim those lights, find that perfect spot where you can just let go. We've got a long journey ahead of us tonight. Back to 1461. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you along for more of these late night history trips. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? I love knowing there are people all over the world drifting off to these stories. Ready? Let's go back. Chapter 1. A Kingdom Torn Asunder. England, 1461. The country's eating itself alive. Two royal houses, York and Lancaster, both claiming the same throne, both willing to bleed the nation dry to get it. They call it the Wars of the Roses, but don't let that pretty name fool you. This isn't some courtly romance. This is a family destroying itself, cousin killing cousin, noble against noble, and caught in the middle, an 18-year-old boy named Edward, who just declared himself king. See, Edward's got a problem. There's already a king. Henry VI, Lancastrian, been on the throne for decades, but Henry's broken. Mind's gone, spends months not speaking, not moving, just staring at nothing. His own courtiers whisper about it. Mad King Henry, they call him. Can't rule, can't fight, can barely function. And when your king can't lead, when he's more ghost than man, that throne starts looking mighty tempting to ambitious nobles with their own claims. Enter the Yorkists. Edward's family. They've been watching Henry fall apart for years, watching England crumble, while he sits there, vacant-eyed and useless. They've got royal blood too, better claim they say, stronger leadership. Edward's father tried to take the throne and died for it. Now it's Edward's turn. 18 years old and already proclaimed himself King Edward IV. Problem is, the Lancastrians aren't exactly rolling over. They've got their own champion, and she's absolutely terrifying. Queen Margaret of Anjou, Henry's wife, French-born, steel-spined, and absolutely ruthless. While her husband sits drooling in his chair, she's the one holding the Lancastrian cause together, with her bare hands if necessary. Margaret doesn't just want to keep the throne, she wants to destroy anyone who dares challenge it. She's already got Edward's father's head on a spike, his younger brother too, executed after a battle, their heads decorating the gates of York. That's the kind of woman we're dealing with here. So you've got teenage Edward, fresh crowned and desperate to prove himself. You've got Mad King Henry, more decoration than monarch. And you've got Queen Margaret, ready to burn England down before she gives up power. Oh, and here's where it gets really interesting. The whole medieval system that's held England together for centuries, it's collapsing. The old feudal bonds, the ancient loyalties, the way things have always been done, all of it cracking apart like ice in spring. Lords who used to serve one master for life are switching sides based on who pays better. Knights who swore sacred oaths are breaking them when convenient. The rigid hierarchy that kept everyone in their place, gone. And into that chaos comes something new, something that'll change warfare forever: gunpowder. Primitive handguns appearing on English battlefields. The old world of sword and shield is dying. The age of cannon and shot is being born, right here, right now, in blood and snow. Towns are choosing sides like it's a game, except the stakes are everything. Back the wrong royal house and you're dead. Your family's dead. Your lands are seized. Your name becomes a curse. Nobles are hedging their bets, sending sons to fight for both sides, just in case. because when the dust settles, somebody's going to be very, very angry with anyone who picked wrong. The smart money says stay neutral, but neutrality's getting harder to maintain when armies are marching through your backyard. And the common folk. They're caught in the middle of this aristocratic blood feud, their crops trampled by armies, their sons pressed into service, their villages burned if they show loyalty to the wrong flag. This isn't their fight. They don't care whether a York or a Lancaster sits in London. They just want to plant their fields and raise their children and not get murdered by passing soldiers. But civil war doesn't care what common folk want. Civil war takes what it needs. By early 1461, both sides are gathering their strength. Edward's got momentum, fresh victories, the energy of youth, support from powerful nobles who smell opportunity in this teenage king. The Lancastrians, they've got experience, Margaret's tactical brilliance, the legitimacy of the sitting king, mad or not, and they've got something else, desperation, because if they lose this fight, if Edward's claim holds, they're all dead. Every Lancastrian noble, every supporter, every ally, mass execution, that's what's waiting for the losers. So armies are mustering the largest forces England has ever seen, 40,000 men, some say, maybe more. Professional soldiers mixing with farmers pressed into service, knights in full armour alongside archers with their longbows, and now those new weapons. Handguns, primitive things that take forever to load and might blow up in your face, but when they work, when a lead shot punches through the finest plate armour like it's paper, everything changes. The age of the armoured knight is ending. The tension's building like a storm front. You can feel it in London, in York, in every market town and village. Something massive is coming, something that will decide England's fate for generations. Young Edward knows it. Queen Margaret knows it. Even mad King Henry, in whatever's left of his fractured mind, probably senses that his world is about to end, one way or another. The winter of 1460 stretches on, both sides preparing, both sides knowing that come spring they'll settle this in blood. And then March arrives. The armies start moving north, towards a small village in Yorkshire called Towton. Neither side knows they're marching toward the bloodiest day in British history. They just know they're going to fight, for the throne, for their lives, for their vision of what England should be. Palm Sunday, 1461. A blizzard's coming, and with it, 28,000 deaths. The snow's starting to fall. Can you feel it? That cold wind carrying the scent of what's about to happen. Chapter 2. The Birth of a King. Edward's Ascension. March 1461. Yorkshire coast. The sea wind cuts through everything, and there's this 18-year-old who just declared himself King of England, Edward of York. Tall, golden-haired, charismatic as hell. Problem is, half the country doesn't recognise him. The Lancastrians? They're calling him a usurper, a rebel, a dead man walking. But Edward's not backing down. He's gathering an army, and what he's about to assemble near York, it might be the largest force England's ever seen. Think about being 18 and claiming a throne. Your father's dead. Your family's been fighting this war for years. Half the nobles in England want you dead. The other half, well, they're watching, waiting to see if you're worth following. Edward knows this. He knows that everything his family fought for, everything his father died for, comes down to the next few weeks. Win, and he's King Edward IV. Lose, and the House of York dies with him. No pressure, right? The Lancastrians aren't just disagreeing with Edward's claim, they're furious. Henry VI is still alive, still technically king in their eyes. Queen Margaret of Anjou. She's rallying every Lancastrian lord she can find. This isn't a political dispute anymore. This is personal. Blood feud. Edward killed Lancastrian nobles at Mortimer's Cross just weeks ago. They want revenge. They want his head. and they're marching south with everything they've got. War is coming, total war. Edward's learning what it means to be king the hard way. Every decision matters. Every alliance could be the difference between life and death. He's got to think like a politician and a general simultaneously. Trust the wrong person, you're dead. Make the wrong tactical choice, your entire cause collapses. And he's doing this at 18. Most 18-year-olds today are figuring out college. Edward's figuring out how to hold a kingdom together through sheer force of will and military genius. The summons go out across Yorkshire and beyond. Every able-bodied man who owes service to the House of York. Every lord who's decided Edward's their king. They're converging on York. Some come with dozens of men. Others bring hundreds. The Earl of Warwick arrives with his retinue. The Duke of Norfolk is marching north. Word spreads through villages and manor houses. The new king is calling up the realm, and men are answering, thousands upon thousands of them. Picture this scene. Fields around York filling up with armed men, banners flying, horses stamping in the cold March air, archers checking their strings, men-at-arms sharpening swords, the smell of leather and steel and unwashed bodies, campfires stretching to the horizon. This is medieval England mobilizing for war, and at the centre of it all, an 18-year-old who's betting everything on one massive battle. Edward knows this army might be the largest England's ever assembled. It has to be. Everything depends on it. But here's what gets me about Edward. He's not just playing king, he's thinking 3 moves ahead. He knows the Lancastrians are coming. He knows they're angry and desperate. Perfect. Angry enemies make mistakes. Desperate enemies fight harder, but think less clearly. Edward's turning their rage into a tactical advantage. He wants them furious. He wants them coming straight at him. Because he's choosing the ground. He's choosing the terms. And that makes all the difference in medieval warfare. The personal cost is eating at him, though. You can see it in the accounts from the time. Edward's pushing himself harder than anyone else. Up before dawn, last asleep, checking on the men, reviewing tactics, writing letters to potential allies. This isn't just about being king anymore. It's about survival. His survival, his family's survival, the survival of everyone who's followed him this far. 18 years old and carrying the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. Word comes that the Lancastrians are moving. They're not hiding anymore. They're not negotiating. Queen Margaret's assembled her own massive force. They're marching south from Scotland, gathering strength as they go. Northern lords who stayed loyal to Henry VI are joining them. This is it. The moment everyone saw coming. 2 armies, 2 kings, 1 England, and only one side walking away from this. Edward knows it. His men know it. The whole kingdom knows it. The logistics alone should have been impossible. Feeding 40,000 men, finding them water, keeping them organised. Medieval armies usually fell apart from disease and desertion before they ever fought a battle, but Edward's holding this massive force together through pure leadership. He's visiting the camps personally, learning men's names, sharing their concerns, making them believe in him, making them believe in victory. That's not military strategy. That's something deeper. That's the difference between a commander and a king. The weather's turning ugly. March in Yorkshire is brutal anyway, but this feels different. Colder, harsher, like the sky itself is preparing for what's coming. The men are getting restless. You can only hold an army together for so long before it starts eating itself alive. Food's running low. Tempers are running high. Everyone knows the Lancastrians are close. Everyone knows the battle's coming. But when? Where? How? The tension's becoming unbearable. Something has to break soon. Edward's War Council meets every night now. Maps spread across rough wooden tables. Candles flickering in the wind. Reports coming in from scouts. The Lancastrians are maybe 50 miles north, maybe less. They're moving fast. They want this battle as much as Edward does. Both sides know there's no point in manoeuvring anymore, no point in trying to avoid each other. This war has gone on too long. Too many people have died. It ends here, one way or another. Here's the thing about Edward, that his enemies keep underestimating. He's young, yeah, inexperienced, sure, but he's got this cold tactical intelligence that's way beyond his years. While the Lancastrians are thinking about revenge, Edward's thinking about wind direction, terrain advantages, supply lines, how to turn 40,000 men into a killing machine, the personal stuff, the emotional stuff, the weight of the crown. He's compartmentalizing all of that. Right now, he's just a general preparing for the biggest battle of his life. Palm Sunday approaches. March 29th, 1461. The scouts are reporting contact. The Lancastrians are close enough to see their banners on the horizon. Edward's army is as ready as it's ever going to be. Weapons sharpened, armour checked, prayers said, letters written home. Tomorrow, or the next day, or maybe even tonight, everything changes. The boy who declared himself king is about to find out if England agrees. One battle, everything on the line, and the weather's about to get very, very ugly. Chapter 3. The eve of battle. Armies stand ready. Palm Sunday, March 28th, 1461. The largest army in English medieval history is spreading across the Yorkshire countryside. Nearly 40,000 men. Think about that number for a second. 40,000. That's more soldiers than fought at Agincourt, Hastings or Crecy. They're camping within sight of each other tonight. Yorkist, Lancastrian, White Rose, Red Rose, and tomorrow one of them dies, the other takes England. It's that simple, that brutal. Tonight they wait. You can smell the smoke from thousands of campfires drifting across the fields. 40,000 men don't travel light. Horses, wagons, weapons, armour, food for an army this size. It's a logistical nightmare. But here they are, Edward's Yorkists, holding the high ground near Saxton. The Lancastrians spread out below, closer to the village of Towton. Between them, maybe 3 miles of frozen Yorkshire farmland. 3 miles that tomorrow will be soaked in blood. But tonight they're just cold, hungry men trying to stay warm. The weather's turning ugly. You can feel it in the air, that heavy, oppressive feeling before a storm hits. The wind's picking up from the southwest, carrying the scent of snow. March in Yorkshire, it's not kind. Especially not to armies sleeping rough in open fields. The veterans know what's coming. They're checking their gear twice, making sure their bowstrings stay dry, sharpening blades one more time, because when that snow starts falling tomorrow, visibility drops to nothing. And in a battle this size, that changes everything. Edward's 18 years old. 18. Most kids his age are still figuring out what they want to do with their lives. He's commanding the largest army England's ever seen, preparing to fight for a crown he claimed just weeks ago. You have to wonder what's going through his head tonight. Is he scared? Excited? Both? He's tall, charismatic, born to lead, but tomorrow he finds out if that's enough. One battle, winner takes the throne. Loser? Well, losers in the Wars of the Roses don't usually get second chances. In the Lancastrian camp, the mood's different. Grimmer. They're not fighting for some young pretender to the throne. They're fighting for their anointed king, Henry VI. Sure, he's complicated, mentally unstable, prone to fits of madness that leave him catatonic for months at a time, but he's still their king, and his queen Margaret of Anjou, she's fierce, ruthless, everything Henry isn't. Tonight her commanders are planning how to crush this Yorkist rebellion once and for all. No mercy, no quarter, total victory or total destruction. Let's talk about the men who will do the actual fighting. William Hartwell from Lincolnshire, 24 years old. Archer. Been in Edward's service for 2 years now. He's got a wife back home, Sarah, and a son he's never met, born while he was campaigning in the Welsh marches. Tonight he's writing a letter he hopes he'll never have to send. If you're reading this, you know how it starts. 40,000 men, 40,000 stories like William's, 40,000 reasons to live, to fight, to maybe die. Thomas Grey, Lancastrian man-at-arms from Northumberland, 31 years old. This is his 4th major battle. He survived Wakefield, where they killed Edward's father, watched them stick the Duke of York's head on a pike with a paper crown, mocked him even in death. Thomas knows what this war's about. It's not about noble causes or righteous kings. It's about survival, about which side gets to live and which side gets remembered as traitors. Tonight, he's sharpening his sword and thinking about home, about whether he'll see it again. The chaplains are working overtime tonight, moving through both camps, hearing confessions, giving last rites to men who might not see sunset tomorrow. It's Palm Sunday, the day Jesus entered Jerusalem, the day that started Holy Week. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Tomorrow they'll turn these fields into a slaughterhouse. But tonight they pray. They ask forgiveness for what they're about to do. They make peace with God because they might be meeting him soon. Faith and warfare, sacred and profane, all mixed up together. Sleep doesn't come easy when you know tomorrow might be your last day alive. Men are tossing and turning in their bedrolls, staring up at the cloudy sky. Some are writing letters home. Others are checking their gear for the 100th time. The lucky ones manage to doze fitfully, startling awake at every sound. A horse snorting, a sentry calling the watch, the wind rattling through bare tree branches. Your mind plays tricks on you. Every shadow could be an enemy scout. Every noise could be the signal that battle's starting early. Around the campfires, the stories start flowing. War stories, home stories, lies and legends all mixed together. Old veterans telling younger soldiers what to expect tomorrow. Stay with your unit. Don't chase after fleeing enemies. Keep your shield up. Watch for arrows. But they also tell other stories about battles they've won, friends they've lost, the time they nearly died at Northampton, the girl they left behind in Coventry. Stories to keep the fear at bay. Stories to remember who they are before tomorrow tries to erase them. The night drags on. 3 o'clock, 4. The temperature's dropping. You can see your breath now. The campfires are burning lower. Guards are stamping their feet to stay warm. Some men are already up, unable to sleep. They're checking arrows, testing bowstrings, making sure their armour fits right. The smart ones are eating, getting food down while they still can, because once this thing starts, once 40,000 men collide on that battlefield, there won't be time for meals. There won't be time for anything except survival. 5 in the morning. Still dark, but you can feel dawn coming. The eastern sky's starting to lighten just a little. The wind's picked up, colder now, biting. And is that, yes, snow? The first few flakes drifting down from the heavy clouds overhead. The veterans are nodding grimly. They knew this was coming. Snow changes everything in a battle. Visibility, footing, the way arrows fly. It's going to be ugly out there. Uglier than anyone imagines. But there's no backing down now. Too much blood's been spilled. Too much pride is at stake. 6 o'clock. The horizon's glowing faintly. Dawn's coming, whether they're ready or not. Men are starting to stir throughout both camps. Rolling up bedrolls, kicking dirt over dying fires. The smell of breakfast, if you can call it that, drifts through the morning air. Porridge, bread, watered ale, a last meal for some of them. The commanders are already up, huddled around maps, making final adjustments to their battle plans. But plans have a way of falling apart once the arrows start flying, once men start dying. The sun's rising now. March 29th, 1461. Palm Sunday's over. The day of reckoning has arrived. 40,000 men are waking up to the reality that in a few hours, half of them might be dead. The snow's falling harder now, big wet flakes that stick to everything. Armour, banners, the ground beneath their feet. It's going to be a day that changes England forever, a day that earns a place in history as the bloodiest battle ever fought on British soil. But they don't know that yet. They're just cold, scared, ready. Chapter 4. The battle begins. An unforeseen fury. March 29th, 1461. Palm Sunday morning. The kind of day when God seems to have picked sides. Two armies face each other across a snow-covered field near Towton. 40,000 men. Maybe more. The largest gathering of armed English soldiers in medieval history. And they're about to tear each other apart. The wind's picking up. Snow starting to swirl. Edward IV, 18 years old, sits his horse and watches the Lancastrian banners snap in the gusting air. The weather's turning nasty fast. What started as light flurries is becoming something else entirely. A proper blizzard building. The kind of storm that changes everything. And here's what's wild about this. The wind is blowing directly from the Yorkist lines toward the Lancastrians, straight at their faces. Edward's commanders are grinning under their helmets because they know what this means. In medieval warfare, wind direction isn't just weather, it's artillery advantage. It's death delivered at distance. It's everything. The Yorkist archers step forward. Thousands of them. English longbowmen, the most feared soldiers in Europe. These aren't random peasants with hunting bows. These are professionals. Men who've been drawing longbows since childhood, each one capable of sending a bodkin arrow through plate armour at 200 yards. And now they've got the wind at their backs. Their effective range just increased by 50, maybe 60 yards. The Lancastrians are still out of shooting distance, but the Yorkists? They can already taste blood. The command comes down the line. Knock, draw, loose. 10,000 arrows launch into the grey morning sky. A second volley follows. Then a third. The sound is incredible, like massive birds taking flight all at once. The arrows climb, then arc over, carried by the howling wind. From the ground, it looks like the sky is falling, like the weak winter sunlight is being eaten by a swarm of death. The Lancastrians watch this black cloud descending, and know they're in serious trouble. The first arrows hit like hail. Bodkin points punch through mail. Broadheads find gaps in armour. Men scream, horses rear and fall. But this is just the beginning. The Lancastrian commanders know they can't just stand there and take this punishment. They have to close the distance, get into melee range where their superior numbers might matter. The order goes out, advance, and suddenly 40,000 men are moving through deepening snow toward each other. The biggest medieval battle in English history is about to become hand-to-hand. This is where the field earns its name. Bloody Meadow. What starts as organised battle lines dissolves into something primal. Axes split skulls. Swords find throats. Warhammers crush armour like tin. The snow turns red, then brown, then black with blood and mud. Men slip on the frozen ground and die where they fall. Others use their bodies as stepping stones. The blizzard makes everything worse. You can barely see 10 feet. Every shadow might be death coming for you. The bodkin arrows are still flying even as the armies collide. These aren't the broad hunting arrows you might imagine. These are armour piercers. Long, needle-sharp points designed for one thing, punching through the best protection medieval technology can provide. A bodkin arrow from a 160-pound warbow will go through a breastplate like paper. And in this chaos, with men packed together, every arrow finds flesh. Armour that cost a knight's fortune becomes his tomb. Then you hear them, the handguns. Primitive firearms that sound like thunder in the storm. Bang, bang, bang. These early guns are clumsy, slow to reload, and not terribly accurate. But in a melee like this, accuracy doesn't matter. Point it at the enemy mass and pull the trigger. The psychological effect is devastating. Men have fought arrows and swords for centuries, but this sound, this is new. This is the future of warfare, being born in blood and snow. Chaos. That's the only word for it. All those careful battle plans, gone. All that medieval ceremony and chivalry, dead in the mud. This isn't noble combat anymore. This is survival. Raw, desperate, animal. Men claw at each other with broken weapons. They bite, they gouge, they use rocks when their swords break. The blizzard has turned the battlefield into a frozen hell where friend and enemy blur together in the swirling snow. Kill or be killed. Picture being there. You're some farmer's son who answered his lord's call. You've never been in a real battle before. Maybe you've brawled at market day, but this is different. Your hands are numb with cold. Your sword feels like it weighs 100 pounds. Blood freezes on your face. Every breath burns your lungs. And everywhere you look, men are dying, horribly. The sound they make, that's going to haunt your dreams. If you live to have dreams. The battle's been raging for hours now. Hours. Think about that. Hand-to-hand combat in a blizzard for hours. Most medieval battles lasted minutes. This one just keeps going. Men are exhausted, hypothermic, running on pure adrenaline and terror. The snow is so deep now it's hard to move. Bodies are piling up, and still they fight, because stopping means dying, because there's nowhere to run, because this is total war, and only one side walks away. Survival instinct kicks in. Higher thinking shuts down. You're not fighting for Edward or Henry anymore. You're not fighting for York or Lancaster. You're fighting because the man in front of you is trying to kill you and you want to live until sunset. It's that simple, that brutal. Medieval warfare stripped down to its essence. Technology doesn't matter here. Training barely matters. What matters is who wants to live more and who's willing to do anything to make that happen. The field is a carpet of the dead and dying. Men calling for their mothers, for water, for God. Some just make animal sounds, wordless pain that cuts through the wind. The lucky ones died quick, sword thrust to the heart, arrow through the eye. The unlucky ones are trapped under bodies, slowly freezing, slowly bleeding out. The snow keeps falling, covering everything. Soon it'll be hard to tell where the earth ends and the corpses begin. But this is just the beginning. The main battle hasn't even started yet. What you've witnessed so far, this is the warm-up, because riding hard through the storm, the Duke of Norfolk is coming with fresh Yorkist troops, thousands of them, rested, eager, and when they hit the exhausted Lancastrian lines, that's when this battle becomes something else entirely. That's when Towton transforms from medieval warfare into medieval massacre. The bloodiest day in British history is about to get worse. Chapter 5. Tide of Battle, a timely arrival. The blizzard's still raging, men dying in the snow. Yorkist and Lancastrian lines locked in this brutal stalemate for hours now. Then something changes. A sound carries over the wind. Not screaming, not clashing steel. Horns, war horns from the south. And suddenly there's movement on the horizon. Banners cutting through the white. Fresh troops marching in formation. The Duke of Norfolk's arrived, and he's brought an army. Picture this moment. You're a Yorkist soldier, exhausted, frozen, your sword arms numb from swinging at Lancastrian heads for 3 hours straight. Then you see those banners, Norfolk's White Lion, fresh men, thousands of them, clean armour gleaming, even in this grey light. They're not bloodied, not tired, not broken down by this endless battle, and they're on your side. The sound that goes up from the Yorkist ranks, it's not quite human. Norfolk's no amateur. This guy knows how to read a battlefield. He's surveying the situation as his forces deploy, sees the Lancastrian left flank stretched thin, sees where Edward's boys are getting hammered hardest, and instead of just charging in like some glory hound, he's thinking, positioning his men where they'll do maximum damage, where they'll break the Lancastrian line completely. Strategic genius meeting pure desperation. Perfect timing. The cheer that erupts from the Yorkist side, you can probably hear it in York. 3 miles away, men who thought they were dying today, suddenly believing they might see tomorrow. Weapons raised high, voices cracking from the cold but screaming anyway. Fresh hope flowing through ranks that were ready to break. Edward himself probably feels it. That shift, that moment when everything changes, when survival becomes victory. But over on the Lancastrian side, different story. Their commanders see those fresh banners and their hearts sink. They're already fighting with everything they have. Their men are exhausted, supplies running low, and now, this. Thousands of fresh enemy troops hitting their weakest point. You can almost see the realization spreading through their ranks. The math doesn't add up anymore. This battle just became unwinnable. Norfolk's forces slam into the Lancastrian left like a hammer on glass. These are fresh men against soldiers who've been fighting since dawn in a blizzard, no contest. The impact ripples down the entire Lancastrian line, men who were holding their ground suddenly looking over their shoulders, wondering if they should run, wondering if anyone else is already running. That's how lines collapse, not all at once, but doubt by doubt. Here's what's brutal about this moment. It's not just the physical reinforcement, it's psychological warfare at its purest. The Lancastrians have been telling themselves they can win this. They outnumbered the Yorkists this morning. They had the high ground, but now there's no story they can tell themselves that ends with victory. Fresh troops, fresh hope for the enemy. Their own exhaustion suddenly feels crushing. Watch how both sides adjust their tactics now. The Yorkists start pressing harder everywhere, taking risks they wouldn't take an hour ago, because they know help is coming. They know they just need to hold on a little longer. Meanwhile, Lancastrian commanders are desperately trying to shore up their crumbling left flank, pulling men from other positions, creating gaps, creating opportunities for Edward's forces to exploit. The momentum shift is almost physical. You can feel it rolling across the battlefield like a wave. Norfolk's troops aren't just fighting, they're advancing, pushing forward. The Lancastrian retreat starts small, a few steps back, then a few more, and suddenly that disciplined line that held for hours is bending, stretching, starting to snap in places. The tide has turned, literally, unstoppably. Think about being a common soldier in this moment. Lancastrian side, you've been fighting since sunrise. Your friends are dead. Your captain's dead. Now there's enemy soldiers everywhere you look. Fresh ones, clean ones, eager ones, and your own line is falling apart around you. At what point do you stop fighting for Lancaster and start fighting just to get home alive? That point, it's happening right now. The Lancastrian left wing isn't just retreating anymore. It's collapsing. Men throwing down weapons, running for the woods. And that panic, it spreads like fire. The centre starts to waver. The right wing looks around and realises they're about to be surrounded. Norfolk's timing was perfect. This isn't just reinforcement. This is the death blow to Lancastrian hopes. The moment Henry VI's cause dies in the snow, Norfolk's forces aren't just winning their section of the battle. They're rolling up the entire Lancastrian flank, taking prisoners, capturing standards, and every banner that falls, every horn that goes silent, it tells the story across the battlefield. The Yorkists are winning, not just surviving, winning. And for the first time today, Edward IV looks like he might actually keep his crown. This is the critical moment. The fulcrum. Everything before this was just set up. Norfolk's arrival doesn't just reinforce the Yorkist line, it breaks the Lancastrian spirit. You can see it happening. Men who fought like lions all morning, suddenly looking for ways out. Commanders trying to organise retreats instead of attacks. The battle's not over yet, but the war just shifted decisively toward Edward. What happens next isn't battle anymore. It's rout. It's massacre. It's thousands of men running through snow-covered fields with Yorkist cavalry hunting them down. The Duke of Norfolk didn't just bring reinforcements to Towton, he brought the end of Lancastrian England. The bodies are about to pile up higher than anyone imagined possible. The bloodiest day in British history is just getting started. Chapter 6. An unravelling defeat. The Lancastrian line breaks. Something's gone wrong. You can see it in their faces first. The men holding the centre, their eyes aren't focused anymore. They're looking sideways, looking back. The arrow storm hasn't stopped, bodies piling up like cordwood, and now the Yorkist heavy cavalry is punching through gaps that shouldn't exist. Sir Andrew Trollope shouts orders nobody can hear over the screaming. The line, it's starting to bend. You have to understand what a medieval battle line meant. It wasn't just soldiers standing in rows. It was everything. Your world, your identity. When you stood shoulder to shoulder with your lord's banner flying overhead, that was civilization. That was order. Now watch it crack. The Lancastrian centre is buckling inward like a ship's hull taking water. Men stumbling backward into the ranks behind them. Panic spreads faster than fire. The smell hits you first. Not death, that comes later. It's fear. 30,000 men sweating through wool and leather in freezing wind, piss and shit, vomit from boys who thought they were ready for this. The metallic taste of blood in the air when bodkin points punch through mail, and underneath it all, something else, something rotten. The stench of everything these men believed in, starting to die around them. Listen, through the blizzard, through the screaming, horns blowing retreat orders that nobody wants to obey, the wet thunk of axes hitting wood and bone, horses shrieking as they go down, and underneath, something worse. The sound of men calling for their mothers in languages that span half of Europe. Because this isn't just England fighting England anymore. French mercenaries, Scottish borderers, Welsh longbowmen, all of them bleeding the same red into Yorkshire snow. Lord Dacre tries to rally his Cumberland men, screaming himself hoarse in the wind. Hold the line, hold for Lancaster. But his voice cracks on the words, because he can see what everyone else sees. The Yorkist banners pushing forward like a slow tide. Edward's men aren't just fighting anymore, they're hunting, moving with the confidence of predators who smell wounded prey. The mathematics of medieval warfare are brutal, and right now the numbers don't lie. Picture the international implications unfolding in real time. Margaret of Anjou is French royalty. Her defeat here doesn't just end Lancaster, it humiliates France. Scottish allies watching their investment in English chaos crumble. Burgundian merchants already calculating the cost of backing the wrong side. This battle matters in Paris, in Edinburgh, in Bruges. The ripple effects of what's happening on this frozen field will reshape European politics for decades. Sir Andrew Trollope knows he's watching the end of everything. 30 years of military service to Lancaster, battles in France, campaigns in Scotland, all of it crumbling because some 18-year-old Yorkist bastard learned how to use the wind. His own men are starting to look at him differently. Not with respect, with blame, with the cold calculation of men deciding whether their commander is worth dying for. The answer, increasingly, is no. The retreat isn't ordered, it just happens. Like water finding the path of least resistance. First one man steps backward, then 5, then 50. The Lancastrian line doesn't break like a sword snapping. It dissolves like salt in water. Suddenly there are gaps everywhere. Yorkist cavalry pouring through, men throwing down weapons and running, the banner of Somerset toppling into the mud. Everything Lancaster built, washing away in blood and snow. Watch the lords now. These aren't common soldiers anymore. These are earls and barons whose ancestors conquered kingdoms. And they're running, not retreating with dignity, running like rabbits, some throwing off their jupons to hide their allegiances, others screaming for their horses, a few still trying to maintain some semblance of command while their world collapses around them. Pride dies hard, but it does die, usually messily. The human cost is becoming clear. This isn't just military defeat, it's generational slaughter, entire bloodlines ending in Yorkshire mud, boys who'll never become fathers, brothers who rode here together now scattered across miles of frozen ground. The sound you hear isn't victory cheers from the Yorkists, it's something else, the low moan of a nation bleeding out, the death rattle of medieval England's golden age. Foreign observers are scribbling notes they'll send to their kings. The English have gone mad, father fighting son, brother against brother, the flower of English nobility cutting itself to pieces over royal bloodlines. Most people can't even follow anymore. From Paris to Rome to Vienna, they're watching the most powerful kingdom in Christendom tear itself apart, some with horror, others with barely concealed glee. Self-preservation kicks in hard now. Forget loyalty, forget honour, forget everything your grandfather taught you about dying well. Survival trumps everything. Men are stripping off their colours, hiding their faces. Some actually switching sides mid-battle when they see which way the wind's blowing. It's ugly, it's human, and it's happening everywhere you look. The noble ideals of chivalry drowning in very practical fear. But here's what makes this moment truly terrifying. Nobody knows how this ends yet. The Lancastrians are broken but not destroyed. Thousands are fleeing toward Tadcaster, toward York. Some might regroup, some might fight again. The Yorkists know they can't let that happen. What comes next, what's about to happen to those fleeing men, will make everything you've heard so far look like a warm-up. The real horror is just beginning. The line is gone. 60 years of Lancastrian dominance dissolving like morning mist. But Edward's not done, not even close, because medieval warfare has its own rules about mercy. And those rules, they're about to get very, very ugly. What happens when a medieval army breaks and runs isn't battle anymore. It's something else entirely. Something that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives, if they have lives left to haunt. Chapter 7. The Slaughter in Retreat. The Bloody Aftermath. The line breaks. Everything unravels. One moment the Lancastrians are holding their ground, fighting tooth and nail. The next, total collapse. Panic spreads like wildfire through their ranks. And when a medieval army breaks, when soldiers throw down their weapons and run, that's when the real killing begins. Because now it's not a battle anymore, it's a hunt. And the Yorkists, they're about to show just how merciless victory can be when blood runs hot and revenge tastes sweet. Picture this. You're a Lancastrian foot soldier. Your buddies are dead. Your captain's gone. The man next to you just took an arrow through the throat. The Yorkist battle cry is getting closer, louder. What do? You run. Course you run. Problem is, everyone else has the same idea. Suddenly, it's not an army retreating, it's a mob. A terrified, stumbling, desperate mob of men who know they're about to die. And behind them, the Yorkists are coming, fast, organised, ready to finish what they started. The pursuit begins immediately. No time to regroup, no chance to catch your breath. The moment that Lancastrian line crumbles, the Yorkists surge forward like wolves scenting blood. These aren't exhausted soldiers anymore, they're hunters. Adrenaline pumping, victory within reach. They've been fighting for hours in a blizzard. And now they get to collect their prize. Every fleeing enemy is a target. Every stumbling figure ahead represents survival for their cause, and they show absolutely no mercy. None whatsoever. This is medieval warfare at its most brutal. The fleeing soldiers scatter in every direction. Some head for the woods, others make for the roads. But most are driven toward Cockbeck. This little stream, normally maybe 3 feet wide, becomes a death trap, because when you're running for your life in heavy armour, already exhausted from battle, that stream might as well be an ocean. Men stumble down the banks, slip on the ice, fall in the freezing water, and the Yorkists, they just keep coming, cutting down anyone they catch, no prisoners, no quarter asked or given. Here's where it gets truly horrific. Cockbeck starts filling up with bodies, not just one or two, dozens, then hundreds, dead men in full armour sinking into the stream, wounded soldiers drowning in water that's turning red with blood. And the killing doesn't stop. More Lancastrians reach the stream, more get cut down, the bodies pile up, layer upon layer, until something incredible and terrible happens. The corpses create their own bridge, literally, a bridge made of dead men that the living can walk across. Think about that for a second. A bridge of corpses. That's not some medieval legend or exaggeration. Contemporary accounts all mention it. The stream was so choked with bodies that men could walk across on the dead. This tells you everything about the scale of what's happening here. We're not talking about a few dozen casualties. We're talking about industrial level slaughter. Systematic, relentless. The Yorkists aren't just defeating their enemies, they're obliterating them. Every man who fled became a target. Every target became a corpse. And the killing just continued. The broken formations scatter like leaves in a hurricane. Banners are thrown down. Commanders abandon their men. It's every man for himself now. Some Lancastrians try to surrender. Fat chance. The Yorkists have been fighting in a blizzard for hours. They've seen their friends die. Their blood is up, and mercy isn't on the menu. Swords rise and fall. Axes bite deep. Men scream. Men beg. Men die. The organised retreat becomes a massacre. The massacre becomes a nightmare, and through it all, that little stream keeps filling up with the dead. The blizzard makes everything worse. Snow is still falling. Wind cutting through armour like it's nothing. Visibility is terrible. You can barely see 10 yards in any direction. For the fleeing Lancastrians, this means they're stumbling blind through unfamiliar terrain, getting separated from their comrades. Lost, disoriented, easy targets for any Yorkist who spots them. But for the pursuers, the snow works in their favour. It slows down the retreat, traps men in drifts, forces them to leave tracks that are impossible to hide. Perfect hunting conditions. Imagine you're 18 years old, farmer's son from Lancashire, joined up because your lord commanded it. Now you're running through a snowstorm, armour weighing you down, no idea which direction leads to safety. You can hear horses behind you, getting closer. Your lungs are burning, your legs are giving out. You stumble, fall face first into the snow. When you look up, there's a Yorkist knight on horseback, sword raised, no time to beg, no time to pray. This is how thousands died that day, running, terrified, alone, cut down like wheat at harvest. From the Yorkist perspective, this is justice. These are the men who challenged their rightful king, who killed their friends at previous battles, who would have done the same to them given the chance. Medieval warfare doesn't recognise the Geneva Convention. When your enemy breaks and runs, you pursue, you kill, you make sure they can never regroup and threaten you again. It's brutal calculus, survival math. Every Lancastrian who escapes today is a Lancastrian who might return tomorrow. Better to end it here, end it now, end it completely. No matter how bloody the reckoning, Cockbeck becomes the killing ground. Men slip down the muddy banks and never climb back up. Some drown in 3 feet of water because their armour's too heavy. Others get their throats cut while they're struggling to stand. The stream runs red. Actually red. Not metaphorically. The water turns crimson with blood and stays that way for hours. Bodies pile up so thick they create dams. natural barriers of flesh and steel that change the very flow of the water. This little stream becomes a monument to medieval warfare's absolute brutality. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. We're talking about potentially 10,000 men killed in this pursuit alone. 10,000. That's more than died on the first day of the Somme, more than most entire medieval battles. And it all happens in the space of a few hours on a snowy March afternoon in Yorkshire. The countryside for miles around is littered with corpses. Every field, every road, every stream. The locals will spend weeks just collecting and burying the dead. Some bodies won't be found until spring, when the snow melts. By evening, the pursuit finally winds down, not because the Yorkists showed mercy, because there's no one left to chase. The Lancastrian army has been effectively annihilated. Those who escaped did so only because darkness and the continuing blizzard finally gave them cover. But the damage is done. A generation of northern English nobility lies dead in the fields around Towton. The flower of Lancaster's strength cut down in a single afternoon. The Wars of the Roses will continue, but Lancaster will never field an army like this again. Never. What happened at Cockbeck that day echoed through English consciousness for centuries. Writers would reference it, poets would invoke it. The Bridge of Corpses became shorthand for war's ultimate horror, because this wasn't just military defeat, this was obliteration, the systematic destruction of an entire cause and the men who served it. Palm Sunday, 1461, the day a little Yorkshire stream taught England what total war actually looked like, and the lesson: some victories cost so much blood that even the winners never really recover from the winning. Chapter 8. Carnage in numbers. The fighting's over, the screaming stopped. What's left is silence broken only by the wind and the sound of ravens. Thousands of them, descending like a black cloud across Towton's frozen fields. They know what humans sometimes forget. Death feeds life, and here, spread across acres of trampled snow and mud, lies the feast of a lifetime. 28,000 men. Gone. In a single afternoon, the bloodiest day in British history had just ended. But the reckoning? That was just beginning. 28,000 dead. Let that sink in for a second. To put this in perspective, that's more than Britain lost on the first day of the Somme in World War I. More casualties in one medieval battle than in any single day of modern warfare on British soil. We're talking about roughly 1% of England's entire population at the time. Imagine if 3 million Americans died in one battle today. That's the scale we're dealing with. And these weren't just numbers. These were fathers, sons, brothers, each with a story that ended here. The field looked like something out of hell. Bodies stacked so thick in some places you couldn't see the ground. Men who'd been cutting each other down hours earlier now lay tangled together, frozen in their final moments. Yorkist white roses soaked red. Lancastrian red roses turned black with dried blood. The Cockbeck stream? You couldn't see water anymore, just a bridge of corpses 3 men deep. Some say it stayed clogged for days. The dead literally damming the flow of the living world around them. And the ravens. God, the ravens. They came in waves. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Black wings blotting out what little daylight remained. Medieval chroniclers wrote about it like a biblical plague. These birds, they had a job to do. Nature's cleanup crew. But watching them work over the remains of an entire generation, it broke something in the people who witnessed it. You can hear it in the writings that survived. This wasn't just a battle. It was an apocalypse made manifest on English soil. The survivors faced their own kind of hell. Medieval medicine couldn't handle trauma like this. Men with arrows through their chests, swords through their guts, missing limbs, crushed bones. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky, they lingered for days, weeks, months. No morphine, no antibiotics, just pain and prayer. Villages across Yorkshire suddenly filled with broken men who'd seen too much, who'd done too much. Post-traumatic stress wasn't a term yet, but the condition that was as old as warfare itself. Think about the families. 28,000 men didn't just vanish into thin air. Each had people waiting at home, wives wondering why their husbands didn't return from war, mothers scanning every group of survivors, hoping to catch a glimpse of their sons, children who'd never again hear their father's voice. In a world where news travelled slowly, the uncertainty was torture. Some families spent months, even years, not knowing if their loved ones were among the living or the dead, scattered across Towton's killing fields. The economic impact was staggering. Imagine losing 1% of your workforce overnight. Farms with no one left to work them. Blacksmith shops sitting empty. Entire bloodlines just gone. Yorkshire and Lancashire were hemorrhaging people, and the survivors had to pick up the pieces. Some villages lost every fighting-age male, women suddenly running businesses they'd never touched, children growing up without fathers, uncles, older brothers. The social fabric of northern England didn't just tear, it got shredded beyond recognition. Mass graves. That's what it came down to. You can't bury 28,000 people individually when half your gravediggers are among the dead. So they dug pits, long deep trenches where men who'd fought as mortal enemies got thrown together in death, Yorkist and Lancastrian, side by side for eternity. Some historians think they're still finding these graves. Archaeological digs turn up jumbled skeletons, medieval weapons, fragments of armour. The earth itself became a monument to this single day's brutality. The psychological scar went deeper than anyone expected. This wasn't just another medieval battle. This was different. The scale, the brutality, the sheer waste of human life. It changed how people thought about war. Chronicles from the period described Towton in apocalyptic terms. It became the benchmark for describing massive bloodshed. When later writers wanted to convey the horror of conflict, they referenced Towton. It entered the national consciousness as shorthand for war's ultimate cost. The day England learned what total warfare actually looked like. Winter light fading over endless fields of the dead. That's the image that haunted survivors. The snow that had helped the Yorkists win was now their burial shroud. Red stains spreading across white ground like spilled wine on clean linen. Medieval poets called it the Bloody Meadow. Local farmers refused to work those fields for years afterward. They said the soil stayed red too long, that crops grew strange colours. Whether true or not, the psychology was real. The land itself felt cursed by what it had witnessed. Edward IV had won his crown, but at what cost? He was 18 years old, standing over the corpses of 28,000 men. Victory, they called it. But looking across those fields of death, surrounded by the sound of ravens and the moans of the dying, did it feel like victory? The throne was his. The Lancastrian cause was broken, but the price was a generation of Englishmen feeding the crows. Some victories cost more than defeats. Towton was beginning to feel like one of them. The numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story either. 28,000 dead, maybe more. Some chroniclers claim 38,000. The exact count didn't matter to the women sewing black cloth that spring, or the children learning to say prayers for fathers they'd never see again, or the villages that turned into ghost towns overnight. Statistics are cold comfort when you're living through the aftermath of devastation, and England was about to learn that lesson in the harshest way possible. Archaeological evidence keeps proving the medieval chroniclers right. Mass graves scattered across the battlefield, primitive handgun balls mixed with bodkin arrowheads, human bones showing trauma consistent with medieval weapons. The ground literally tells the story of that Palm Sunday massacre. Every dig reveals more evidence of the slaughter. Historians used to think medieval writers exaggerated battle casualties. Towton taught them otherwise. Sometimes the reality of war is exactly as horrible as the survivors said it was. No exaggeration necessary. In the end, Towton became more than a battle. It became a cautionary tale. A reminder of what happens when political disputes turn into total war. The ravens eventually finished their grim work and flew away. The snow melted, revealing the full scope of the carnage. And England buried its dead and tried to move forward. But some wounds never fully heal. Some scars run too deep. The Bloody Meadow had taught the nation a lesson it would never forget. War's true cost isn't measured in crowns won or lost. It's measured in the silence where voices used to be. Chapter 9. A reign secured. Edward's triumph. The 18-year-old king stands in the aftermath. Towton Field stretches before him, carpeted with 28,000 corpses. Edward IV should be celebrating. He's just won the bloodiest battle in English history, secured his throne, crushed the Lancastrian cause. But here's what nobody expected. The boy king isn't smiling, he's staring at the bodies. His bodies, men who died for his crown, and something's changing behind those young eyes, something nobody saw coming. Think about this moment. Edward has achieved something extraordinary. 6 months ago, he wasn't even king. His father was dead. His cause looked hopeless. The Lancastrians controlled most of England. Henry VI sat on the throne, mad or not. Queen Margaret commanded fierce loyalty. Edward had York, maybe the Midlands. That's it. Now he's standing over the corpses of his enemies. The impossible has happened. A teenage usurper has become England's undisputed king. But victory tastes different than he imagined. The reports coming in are staggering. Nearly every major Lancastrian commander is dead or missing. The Earl of Northumberland, Lord Clifford, who killed Edward's father, Andrew Trollope, their master tactician, gone. Their entire military structure has collapsed in a single afternoon. Edward's won more than a battle. He's decapitated a dynasty. But as messengers bring news of the slaughter, Edward's reactions surprise everyone. He's not gloating, he's grieving. This wasn't supposed to cost so much. Not 28,000 lives. Now comes the real work. Winning a crown is one thing. Keeping it? That's politics. Edward immediately starts consolidating power. He pardons some Lancastrian nobles, executes others. Smart choices, mostly. He's learning that kingship requires calculated mercy and strategic brutality. The survivors need to see strength, but also hope for redemption. Too much forgiveness looks weak. Too much vengeance creates martyrs. Edward walks this line carefully. He's 18, but he's thinking like a seasoned ruler. The boy king is becoming something more dangerous. But not all Lancastrians died at Towton. Henry VI escaped north. Queen Margaret fled to Scotland with Prince Edward. Dozens of nobles are missing, probably heading for the border. Edward can't let them regroup. So begins the hunt. Yorkist patrols spread across northern England, searching castles, monasteries, forests. Anyone who sheltered Lancastrian fugitives faces execution. This isn't just mopping up after a battle, it's systematic elimination of a bloodline. Edward's learning that total victory requires total ruthlessness. Some lessons come hard at 18. The political chess game is fascinating to watch. Edward rewards his supporters lavishly. Land, titles, marriages, trading rights. The Nevilles, who backed him early, get massive estates. The Duke of Norfolk, whose late arrival at Towton proved decisive, receives pardons for past wavering and future loyalty. But Edward's also making enemies. Every reward to a Yorkist means dispossession for a Lancastrian family. Every execution creates orphans and widows. He's building a new aristocracy while destroying an old one. Dangerous work even for a victor. England in spring 1461 is a wounded kingdom. Towton wasn't just a battle, it was trauma. Entire regions lost their leadership in a single day. Yorkshire alone probably lost 500 knights and esquires. Imagine the ripple effects. Estates without heirs, trade disrupted, local government collapsed. Villages that sent their young men to fight now have nobody to bring in the harvest. Edward's victory is complete, but he's inherited a broken realm. Healing will take years, if it happens at all. What's remarkable is how quickly Edward matures. 6 months ago, he was still learning swordwork. Now he's making life and death decisions for thousands, choosing which captured nobles live or die, deciding which castles to garrison, which towns to reward, which monasteries to search. His council offers advice, but the final calls are his, and he's getting them right, mostly. There's something unsettling about watching a teenager wield this kind of power with growing confidence, like watching a wolf learn to hunt. The remaining threats are real. Scottish raids intensify as Margaret seeks revenge. French gold starts flowing to Lancastrian exiles. Wales stays restless under Yorkist rule. Edward's victory at Towton was decisive, not final. He's won the major battle, but the war continues. Every week brings reports of Lancastrian conspiracies, foreign plotting, noble defections. Edward responds with a mixture of diplomacy and force, marriage alliances, trade agreements, and when necessary, executions. He's learning that kingship never rests. The crown is won daily, not once. Watch Edward establish royal authority. He's everywhere at once, it seems. Holding court in York, reviewing troops in Durham, hearing petitions in London. This is deliberate. People need to see their king, touch him, hear him speak their names. Medieval kingship is personal, physical. Edward understands this instinctively. He's tall, handsome, charismatic, perfect for the role. But underneath the royal progress, there's steel. Cross him now, and you disappear. Support him, and you prosper. Simple mathematics. Brutal, but effective. The price of Edward's triumph keeps revealing itself. Mass graves around Towton take weeks to dig. Some bodies are never recovered. Cockbeck runs Redwell into April. Local priests work overtime, blessing the dead, comforting the survivors. But here's what haunts Edward. Many of the corpses are boys, 16, 17, 18 years old. His age, sons of farmers and merchants who answered their lord's call and died in a Yorkshire field they'd never seen before. Victory feels different when you count the cost in faces, not numbers. By summer 1461, Edward IV is transforming before everyone's eyes. The eager teenager who charged into battle at Towton is becoming something harder, more calculating. He still laughs easily, still charms courtiers and foreign ambassadors. But there's ice underneath now, a willingness to destroy anyone who threatens his throne. His supporters love this new steel. His enemies fear it. Smart people recognize what's happening. Edward isn't just growing up, he's becoming the kind of king who survives, the dangerous kind. But Edward's triumph comes with hidden costs. The Nevilles who helped him win the crown expect continued influence. The nobility want rewards for their loyalty. Foreign powers probe for weaknesses. And somewhere in Scotland, Queen Margaret plots her return. Edward secured his throne, but keeping it will require different skills. Political cunning, diplomatic finesse, strategic marriages. The warrior king must become a chess master, and the game never ends. Every victory creates new enemies. Every alliance demands new prices. So Edward stands triumphant but wary. Towton gave him England, but England comes with obligations. 28,000 ghosts demand good governance. Living subjects demand justice. Prosperity, peace. Foreign enemies demand vigilance. The crown he won in blood must now be worn with wisdom. At 18, Edward IV has achieved the impossible. Now comes the harder part, keeping it. The boy who became king at Towton must become the king who endures. And the challenges ahead will test everything he's learned. Chapter 10. Aftermath. The scars of Towton. The screaming stopped sometime around midnight. What replaced it was worse, this absolute silence that pressed down on everything like a heavy blanket. March 30th, 1461, dawn creeping over what used to be a battlefield. Now, just death stretched out as far as you could see. 28,000 bodies, maybe more. Nobody was counting anymore. They were just trying to process what they were looking at. Picture this. You're standing where yesterday men were screaming battle cries, clashing steel, dying for their king. Today there's nothing but wind moving through the grass. And bodies. So many bodies they don't look real anymore. Like someone scattered broken dolls across miles of Yorkshire countryside. The snow from yesterday's blizzard is melting now, mixing with blood, creating these little crimson streams that catch the morning light. The locals started arriving around sunrise. Farmers mostly. People who'd watched this army march past their homes just days before. Now they're walking through a graveyard that spans their entire world. Some came looking for relatives. Others, they just came because they had to see it. Had to witness what 28,000 dead men actually looks like spread across your fields. Most turned back. Some couldn't stop staring. The crows arrived first, always do. Black shapes dropping out of the sky like they'd been waiting. Within hours, hundreds of them, then thousands. They're cawing, the only sound breaking that terrible silence. They moved across the field in waves, hopping from body to body, and nobody tried to stop them. What was the point? There were too many dead, not enough living to chase away every scavenger that came calling. Weapons everywhere, swords driven into the ground where their owners fell, crossbow bolts sticking out of tree trunks, thousands of arrows, bodkin points, glinting in the weak sun, mail hauberks torn open, helmets dented beyond recognition, all of it just abandoned, scattered like toys after children finished playing, except these toys had killed 28,000 men, and now they're just metal rusting in the morning dew. The banners were still there. Yorkist, Lancastrian, white rose, red rose, fluttering in the wind like nothing had changed, like their owners might come back any moment to pick them up and march home. But the men who'd carried those flags, they were face down in the mud, or floating in Cockbeck, or piled up where they'd made their last stand. The symbols outlasting the people who believed in them. Margaret from Tadcaster found her brother Thomas on the second day, recognised him by the scar on his left hand from when they were kids, and he'd grabbed a hot poker. Everything else was, well, she sat with him for 3 hours, just sat there in the mud, holding what was left of his hand. Didn't cry, couldn't cry. The grief was too big, too impossible to process. The survivors? God, the survivors might have had it worse. William Saville made it home to his wife in Leeds. Took him 4 days walking. She barely recognised him. Not from injuries, from the look in his eyes. He'd seen his entire company die around him, watched his best friend get an arrow through the throat, and he couldn't understand why he was still breathing when better men weren't. News travelled fast in medieval England, especially news this horrific. By April, everyone from London to Scotland knew about Towton. The numbers, 28,000 dead in a single day. People couldn't comprehend it. That's more than some entire counties had in population. It wasn't just a battle. It was like someone had erased a small city, and everyone started wondering, could this happen to us? The mourning wasn't organised. There weren't official funeral processions or royal proclamations of grief. It was just this quiet sadness that settled over England like fog. Every town had lost someone at Towton. Every family knew a name on those endless casualty lists. Church bells rang for days, not celebrating Edward's victory, just acknowledging the dead. So many dead they couldn't name them all. Some men broke completely. John Clifford's squire, He'd watched his lord get cut down in front of him, went home to Cumbria, and never spoke again, not a word. His wife said he'd wake up screaming about arrows blotting out the sun, about blood flowing like rivers, about friends drowning in their own mail. And he wasn't the only one. The battle followed these men home. The priests tried to make sense of it. God's will, they said. Divine judgment. But even they seemed shaken. How do you explain 28,000 dead in the name of which king sits on a throne? How do you comfort a mother who lost 3 sons in one day? The usual words felt hollow, inadequate, like trying to heal a severed arm with prayer and good intentions. This is what trauma looks like on a national scale. An entire generation scarred by one day's violence. Towton didn't just kill 28,000 men, it changed how England thought about war, about what they were capable of doing to each other. The stories passed down, the nightmares, the way people flinched when they heard armour rattling, a country learning to fear its own capacity for destruction. The mass graves took weeks to dig, huge pits that could hold hundreds at once. No individual markers, no names carved in stone, just dirt piled over the bones of men who died for roses, white and red. And in the years that followed, people would point to those unmarked mounds and whisper, "That's where Towton happened. That's where England bled itself almost to death in a single day." Chapter 11. Towton Revealed. The Archaeological Chronicles. The dead don't lie. 560 years later, they're still talking, speaking through bent arrowheads buried in Yorkshire soil, through fragments of primitive handguns that changed warfare forever, through mass graves that tell stories no chronicle ever recorded. What happened at Towton, we thought we knew. Medieval accounts, Tudor propaganda, romantic Victorian retellings. But then archaeologists started digging, and everything changed. The battlefield itself became a witness. First came the metal detectorists in the 1990s. Weekend hobbyists scanning muddy fields near Towton village. They expected maybe some coins, belt buckles, the usual medieval debris. Instead, bodkin arrowheads. Hundreds of them. These weren't ordinary arrows. 4-sided points designed to punch through plate armour. Each one a death sentence. The concentration was staggering. In some areas, you couldn't walk 10 feet without finding another. The arrow storm that witnesses described, it was real, literally carpeted across acres. But here's what got archaeologists excited. Handgun fragments. Primitive firearms from 1461. Some of the earliest ever found in Northern Europe. Think about that. While most of England was still fighting with swords and longbows, Towton saw cutting-edge military technology, lead shot, iron barrels, trigger mechanisms. These weren't common weapons. Expensive, specialised, brought by soldiers who understood the future of warfare. Medieval meets Renaissance in Yorkshire mud. History pivoting in real time. Then came the discovery that changed everything. 1996. Construction work near Towton Hall. Diggers hit something unexpected. Bones. Lots of bones. Not a normal cemetery. These skeletons were jumbled together. No coffins. No careful arrangement. Mass burial. The kind you do when thousands die in a single day and you need to prevent disease. Archaeologists realised they'd found Towton's dead. After 5 centuries, the bloodiest battle in British history was giving up its secrets. The University of Bradford took over. Professional excavation. Scientific methods. What they found was brutal. 37 skeletons initially, all male, ages 15 to 50. But the trauma, this was violence on an industrial scale. Skull fractures, blade wounds, multiple injuries per skeleton. One man had been struck 11 times. Another showed evidence of being stabbed repeatedly after falling. These weren't clean deaths. This was medieval warfare, stripped of romance, raw, desperate, unforgiving. Each skeleton tells a story. Take Towton 25, researchers' designation for one particular warrior. Mid-30s, strong build from years of physical labour, died from a blade wound to the back of the skull. But first, he'd taken a crossbow bolt to the jaw. Keep fighting. Then someone hit him in the face with a hammer, still standing. Finally that killing blow from behind as he tried to flee. 30 seconds of violence captured in bone. Medieval combat wasn't glorious. The science gets even more fascinating. Stable isotope analysis sounds boring, right? Wrong. It's time travel. By analysing teeth enamel, researchers can determine where someone grew up, what they ate, how they lived. Towton's dead came from across England, some from the North Country, others from the Midlands, even a few from the Welsh borderlands. This wasn't just local conflict. The entire kingdom had mobilised, neighbours killing neighbours from hundreds of miles apart. But wait, there's more. Carbon dating confirmed what historians suspected. These men died in the mid-15th century, right around 1461. DNA analysis revealed family relationships, brothers who died together, fathers and sons who marched to Towton side by side. The Wars of the Roses weren't abstract political conflict. They were families destroying families, communities tearing themselves apart. The genetic evidence makes it personal in ways medieval chronicles never could. Archaeological surveys keep expanding the picture. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, LiDAR scanning from aircraft. The battlefield is revealing itself piece by piece. Battle lines become visible through artifact distributions. Charge routes marked by weapon fragments. Even the famous arrow storm has a pattern, concentrated along the ridge where Yorkist archers took position. Technology is bringing Palm Sunday 1461 back to life, making the invisible visible again. Recent discoveries keep surprising everyone. 2018, construction work near the battlefield uncovered more remains, informal burials, hastily dug graves. Some bodies showed signs of being stripped before burial, armour and weapons taken, clothes removed. Even in death, the practical economics of medieval warfare continued. Nothing wasted, everything recycled, the dead providing for the living who survived to fight another day. Brutal pragmatism embedded in Yorkshire soil. Facial reconstruction brings the past into focus. Computer modelling based on skull measurements creates faces. Real people emerge from anonymous bones. Young men with determined expressions. Older veterans with scars from previous battles. Suddenly medieval warfare has faces. Names might be lost, but humanity remains. These weren't statistics in a history book. They were farmers, craftsmen, minor nobles who answered their lord's call and died for it. The environmental evidence tells its own story. Pollen samples from battle deposits show disturbed vegetation, trampled fields, damaged crops. Even the landscape bears witness to March 1461's violence. Soil layers reveal burn marks where funeral pyres consumed those too numerous for proper burial. The earth itself became a monument to England's bloodiest day, nature recording what human memory eventually forgot. Modern preservation efforts protect what remains. English Heritage Designation, Protected Monument status. The Towton Battlefield Society works with landowners to balance farming with archaeology. Metal detecting continues under controlled conditions. Each artifact catalogued, each discovery adding another piece to the puzzle. The dead are still talking, still teaching us about March 1461, still revealing truths that challenge everything we thought we knew. This is archaeology's gift to history, making the abstract concrete, transforming legends into evidence. The Bodkin arrowheads prove the arrow storms happened. The handgun fragments show technology changing warfare. The broken bones reveal combat's reality, and the mass graves, they make the casualty numbers real. 28,000 dead isn't just a statistic anymore, it's faces, stories, individual tragedies multiplied beyond comprehension. Yorkshire soil remembers what England forgot. Chapter 12. Towton's Legacy. Writings in Time. Here's something wild about Towton. This battle, this nightmare of 28,000 corpses bridging Cockbeck, it didn't just end when the last sword dropped. No, it haunted England for generations. Writers couldn't stop thinking about it. Artists painted it. Chroniclers wrote about it with shaking hands. But here's the weird part. The bloodiest day in British history became something else entirely. A symbol, a touchstone for everything brutal about war itself. Think about this for a second. You're a writer in 1470s England. Maybe you're Thomas Mallory, locked in Newgate prison, crafting your Arthurian tales. But outside your window, people still remember Palm Sunday 1461. Their fathers fought there. Their brothers never came home. The stories are still fresh, still bleeding into conversations, still giving people nightmares. How do you write about war and honour when your readers just lived through the worst battle their island ever saw? Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur hits different when you realise what he's drawing from. All those descriptions of knights cutting through enemies like wheat, the way Arthur's final battle at Camlan becomes this apocalyptic slaughter. Where'd he get that imagery? Towton. The blizzard becomes the mist of Camlan. The corpse bridge over Cockbeck becomes the river of blood in Arthurian legend. Medieval romance was never the same after writers saw what real warfare actually looked like. But it wasn't just Mallory. Every chronicle of the period mentions Towton like it's burned into their memory. The Croyland Chronicle calls it a battle so fierce that the like had never been seen in England. The Warkworth Chronicle can't even describe it properly, just keeps saying great slaughter over and over, like the words don't exist for what happened there. These weren't fiction writers, these were historians, and they couldn't process what they'd witnessed. Here's where it gets really interesting. By the Tudor period, say 1500, Towton had become shorthand for everything terrible about war. When Tudor writers wanted to describe a battle's horror, they'd reference Towton, not Agincourt, not Hastings, Towton. It was like saying, remember the worst thing that ever happened. Everyone knew what you meant. The battle had transcended history. It became metaphor, a cultural scar that wouldn't heal. Shakespeare never wrote about Towton directly, but you can feel it in his Wars of the Roses plays. All that imagery about sons killing fathers, fathers killing sons, civil war tearing England apart, that's Towton bleeding through. Henry VI, Part 3, where the king sits on a molehill watching the carnage. That molehill exists. It's still there. Tourists can visit it. Shakespeare knew his audience would recognise the reference. The battle had become cultural DNA. The ballads are even more direct. The Battle of Towton Field from the 1500 doesn't hold back. The snow was red with Christian blood. The beck ran red to sea. These weren't sophisticated court poems. These were tavern songs, street corner stories, the kind of thing common people sang to remember their dead. Towton had become folk memory, horror stories parents told children, warnings about what happens when kingdoms tear themselves apart. But here's what's really fascinating. Tudor writers didn't just use Towton as shorthand for battle, they used it to talk about betrayal, about honour corrupted, about what happens when brothers fight brothers. The battle became this perfect metaphor for civil war's psychological damage, not just the dead bodies, but the dead souls. The way violence poisoned everything it touched. Towton wasn't just about who won or lost anymore, it was about what England lost. The religious writers went even darker. To them, Towton was God's judgment on England. Palm Sunday 1461, Christ's triumph turned into mankind's greatest failure. Some saw it as punishment for the Wars of the Roses, others as proof that chivalry was dead. The imagery they used, apocalyptic, biblical. This wasn't just a battle anymore, it was England's fall from grace, paradise lost in the Yorkshire snow, and the symbolism kept evolving. By the 1600s, Towton represented the old feudal world destroying itself, the last gasp of medieval knighthood before the modern age. Writers used it to contrast with their own times. Look how civilized we are now, they'd say. Look how barbaric they were then. Towton became this convenient dividing line between medieval brutality and Renaissance enlightenment. Even though plenty of brutality continued after 1461, the visual artists couldn't leave it alone either. Paintings from the 1700s showed Towton as this romantic tragedy. Noble knights dying in beautiful poses, snow falling like heaven's tears. Nothing like the actual mud and blood and screaming, but that's how cultural memory works, right? The horror gets sanitized, the nightmare becomes noble, the corpse bridge over Cockbeck becomes a poetic metaphor for sacrifice and honour. Even the historians couldn't escape Towton's gravitational pull. When they wanted to describe other battles, Culloden, Naseby, Marston Moor, they'd compare them to Towton. Not since Towton had England seen such slaughter. The battle had become the measuring stick for horror, the standard by which all other violence was judged. A cultural bookmark marking the worst day in British military history. Modern writers are still wrestling with Towton. Historical novels, fantasy epics, war poetry, they all come back to that Palm Sunday blizzard. To the image of 28,000 dead in a single afternoon. To the stream choked with corpses. It's become this universal symbol of war's cost. Not just English war, all war. The battle that showed what humans are capable of when kingdoms collide. So Towton's legacy isn't just military or political. It's literary, cultural, psychological. 5 centuries later, we're still trying to understand what happened in that Yorkshire field. Still using it as shorthand for humanity's capacity for violence. Still haunted by the image of snow turning red with blood. The battle ended in 1461, but the writing, the remembering, the wrestling with what it all meant, that's still going on. Chapter 13. A trauma etched. England's nightmare. The snow stopped falling eventually. The screaming died down. But something broke at Towton that never healed. 28,000 men didn't come home that Palm Sunday, and the silence they left behind, it echoed through every village, every manor house, every cottage from Yorkshire to Cornwall. This wasn't just a battle's end. This was the moment England lost its innocence about war, about itself. The nightmare was just beginning. Picture this, an entire generation of fighting men gone. Not spread across years of campaign, not scattered across distant wars, cut down in one afternoon. The demographic crater was staggering. Whole family lines ended at Towton. Noble houses that traced their ancestry back centuries wiped out between morning prayers and evening mass. The very fabric of feudal England, built on bloodlines and inherited loyalty, suddenly had massive holes torn right through it. The wives knew first. They always do. When the survivors started trickling back to their villages, muddy and hollow-eyed, the women could read the news in their faces before a word was spoken. Your husband's not coming home. Your son died screaming in the snow. Your brother's body is somewhere under that pile by Cockbeck. The keening started in Yorkshire. It spread south like wildfire, a wail of grief that seemed to never end. But here's what really broke England's spine. The feudal system wasn't just about loyalty or land ownership. It was about protection. Lords protected their people. Men-at-arms protected their lords. Everyone had their place in this ancient chain of obligation. Towton snapped that chain. Suddenly, entire regions had no protectors. No one left to uphold the old agreements. The medieval world's social contract lay as dead as the men at Towton. The children grew up different after Towton. Think about it. An entire generation raised by widowed mothers, never knowing their fathers, never hearing first-hand stories of chivalry and honour. They heard whispers instead, nightmares about the day it snowed bodies, about streams that ran red for weeks, about armour so dented and bloody it couldn't be cleaned. These kids didn't dream of knighthood, they dreamed of survival. Edward IV tried to move on. Had to, really. He had a kingdom to run, after all. But England couldn't forget. Every court gathering felt like a funeral. So many empty chairs, so many titles with no heirs to claim them. The king would call for his nobles, and silence would answer from whole sections of the realm. The very architecture of power had gaping wounds that wouldn't heal. The songs changed too. Before Towton, minstrels sang of glorious battles, heroic deeds, noble sacrifices. After, the ballads turned dark. They sang of mothers weeping, of fields that wouldn't grow right because too much blood had soaked the soil, of ghosts walking the Yorkshire moors on Palm Sunday. Even the entertainment couldn't escape Towton's shadow. Joy itself felt like a betrayal of the dead. England's political landscape warped around that trauma. Future conflicts became more vicious, more personal. The old rules of chivalrous warfare, dead as the knights at Towton. When civil war flared again, there was a brutality that hadn't existed before. A sense that if you're going to fight, you better win completely, because losing meant extinction. Towton taught that lesson with 28,000 corpses. The land itself seemed cursed. Farmers avoided the battlefield for decades. Locals claimed the soil stayed red longer than it should have, that nothing would grow right where the bodies were buried. Whether that's true or just trauma speaking, well, trauma has its own truth, doesn't it? The psychological wound was so deep it infected the very ground where it happened. Marriage patterns shifted across England. With so many men dead, entire regions faced demographic collapse. Women who should have been wives became permanent spinsters, not by choice, but because their potential husbands were rotting in Yorkshire mass graves. Inheritance laws twisted in knots trying to deal with family lines that simply ended. The legal system wasn't built for genocide, but that's what Towton was. Genocide by battle. The church struggled too. How do you comfort a nation that's lost a generation? How do you preach about God's mercy when 28,000 men died on Palm Sunday, on the holiest week of the Christian calendar? Some priests went mad trying to reconcile it. Others just stopped preaching about divine justice. Faith itself became another casualty of Towton. God's plan seemed a lot less clear after that snowy afternoon. What's haunting is how Towton shaped England's future conflicts. Every military leader who came after had to grapple with its shadow. Henry VIII's wars, more brutal than his predecessors could have imagined. The English Civil War 2 centuries later. The viciousness traces back to lessons learned in blood at Towton. Once you've seen what total war looks like, half measures feel like weakness, like inviting your own destruction. Even today, archaeologists find remnants of that trauma, arrow points, fragments of armour, bones with battle wounds that tell stories of desperate, brutal fighting. The physical evidence keeps surfacing, like the land can't quite digest what happened there. Like England trying to vomit up that poisonous day 5.5 centuries later. Some wounds are too deep to heal. They just persist. So that's the real legacy of Towton. Not just the crown changing hands, or the Wars of the Roses shifting momentum. It's the nightmare that never ended. The trauma that rewrote England's DNA. A nation that learned, in one snowy afternoon, that civilization is paper thin, that everything you think is permanent can die screaming in the mud. England won at Towton, technically, but it never really woke up from the horror. Still hasn't. Chapter 14. Reflections. Towton's forgotten lesson. Here's something that'll mess with your head. More English soldiers died at Towton than on the first day of the Somme. 28,000 men, gone, in a single afternoon. Yet ask anyone about medieval battles, and they'll mention Hastings. 1066. William the Conqueror. That one everyone knows. But Towton? Palm Sunday 1461? The bloodiest day in British history? Crickets. Complete silence. Why do we remember some horrors and forget others? That's tonight's question. Hastings changed everything. One battle, new dynasty, new language, new culture. Clean story. Foreign invader defeats English king. Easy to teach, easy to remember. But Towton, brother killing brother, Englishman slaughtering Englishman. No clear heroes, no foreign villains to blame. Just us, tearing ourselves apart. That's harder to process, harder to mythologize. Civil wars don't make good bedtime stories. They make uncomfortable truths. Maybe that's why we buried Towton in our collective memory. Too raw, too real, too close to home. Historical memory is weird like that. We choose our ghosts carefully. Preserve the ones that serve a purpose. Forget the ones that don't fit our story. Towton doesn't fit. It's messier than Agincourt's glorious victory. More brutal than Hastings' clean conquest. It's just horror. Pure, senseless horror. The kind that makes you question whether any cause is worth 28,000 lives. Whether any crown is worth rivers of blood. Whether any dynasty justifies that level of destruction. Questions without easy answers. So we just don't ask them. But the survivors remembered. Oh, they remembered everything. John Clifford's widow, searching the battlefield for 3 days, finding pieces, fragments, enough to bury, maybe. Thomas Dacre's son, 8 years old, asking when Daddy's coming home from the war. Never, child, never coming home. These stories didn't make it into the history books. Too personal, too painful. The chroniclers wrote about kings and kingdoms. They didn't write about the women who never remarried, the children who grew up fatherless, the holes that never healed. The mass graves told their own stories. Families walking the fields for weeks afterward, hoping to find something, anything. A ring, a piece of armour, a face they recognized among the swollen dead. Most found nothing. Their men had become part of the mud, part of the field itself. Towton's soil is still rich, you know, unusually fertile. Local farmers joke about it, but they know why. Blood makes good fertilizer. 28,000 bodies make very good fertilizer. The dead are still feeding that land. Still there, in a way. The psychological scars ran deeper than anyone knew how to heal. Medieval people understood death. They lived with it daily. But Towton, this was different. This was industrial-scale killing. Assembly line slaughter. Men who'd fought in France, who'd seen war, came home from Towton changed. Hollow. They'd drink themselves stupid trying to forget the sound. That wet thunk of arrows hitting flesh. The screaming that went on for hours. The smell, sweet copper blood mixed with shit and fear. You don't forget smells like that, ever. Communities tried to move on. Had to move on. Life doesn't stop for grief. Even grief this massive. Villages held memorials. Churches said prayers. But what do you pray for after something like Towton? Forgiveness? Forget it. God doesn't forgive 28,000 murders. Understanding? There's nothing to understand. It was madness, pure madness. So they prayed for the dead to rest, for the living to forget, for the whole bloody mess to fade into history. And slowly, it did, except in the quiet moments, when the ghosts came back. The children suffered most, not just the obvious ones, the orphans, the fatherless, but all of them. A generation that grew up knowing their parents had lived through something unspeakable, something that broke them inside. Children learn fear from their parents, learn that the world isn't safe, that neighbours can become enemies overnight, that kings can demand everything and give nothing back. These kids grew up suspicious, careful, always watching the horizon for the next war, because there's always a next war, always another Towton coming. The economic damage was staggering. Not just the direct costs, armies cost money, but the lost productivity. 28,000 men who would never work again, never farm again, never pay taxes or make goods, or raise families. That's not just 28,000 deaths. That's 28,000 futures. 28,000 bloodlines ended. Genetic potential erased. Skills lost. Knowledge gone. The Renaissance came late to England, partly because of days like Towton. Hard to have a cultural flowering when you keep killing your best people. Locally, they never forgot. Go to Yorkshire today, mention Towton, and the old-timers will nod. They know. Their great-great-grandfathers told stories, passed down the horror through generations. But it stayed local, regional, never became national memory the way Hastings did. Maybe because there were no winners at Towton. Not really. Edward won his crown, sure, but at what cost? He'd killed half his kingdom to rule the other half. That's not victory, that's Pyrrhic destruction. That's what civil war really looks like. Ugly, senseless, unwinnable. National memory prefers clean narratives. Good versus evil. Us versus them. Foreign threats we can unite against. But Towton offers none of that comfort. It's just us. Just English people killing English people over a question that didn't really matter. Did it matter who wore the crown? Did Henry or Edward make such a difference that 28,000 men needed to die? Of course not. But once the killing started, it became about pride, about revenge, about not backing down, about everything except what started it all. The ghosts haunted England for generations. Not literal ghosts, though some claimed to see them, but the psychological ghosts, the what-ifs, the might-have-beens, all those men who died for nothing, all those families destroyed for a crown that would change hands again anyway. All that wasted potential, wasted life, it hung over the country like fog, made people suspicious of grand causes, suspicious of kings who promised glory. Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we don't talk about, the ones we bury and pretend never happened. The lesson of Towton isn't complex. It's actually pretty simple. Civil war costs everything and settles nothing. It destroys the thing you're fighting to save. England after Towton was weaker, poorer, more divided than before. The Wars of the Roses dragged on for decades because nobody learned that lesson, because nobody wanted to learn it, because admitting Towton was meaningless would mean admitting all those deaths were meaningless. And humans can't handle meaningless death. We need it to mean something, anything. So we forgot, collectively, deliberately forgot, pushed Towton down into the deep places where uncomfortable truths go to die. Remembered Hastings instead. Foreign conquest is easier to process than self-destruction. Glorious defeat is easier than senseless slaughter. But forgetting doesn't make it disappear. The blood still soaked into that Yorkshire soil. The ghosts still walk those fields. And somewhere in our collective unconscious, we still carry the weight of that Palm Sunday, when 28,000 Englishmen died for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Chapter 15. The Echoes of Towton. An unending legacy. The snow stopped falling 6 centuries ago. The screams faded. The blood soaked into Yorkshire soil. But here's what haunts me about Towton. It never really ended. Walk that field today, and you're stepping on fragments, arrowheads, buttons, teeth. The dead are still there, whispering their stories, and what they're telling us, that the horror we think belongs to modern warfare, it's been with us all along. July 1st, 1916. Somme battlefield. 20,000 British soldiers die in a single day. The worst military disaster in British history. Right? Wrong. Because 455 years earlier, on a snowy field near Towton, 28,000 men died. Maybe more. Same country, same soil, same devastating mathematics of war. The weapons changed. The scale of killing, that stayed exactly the same. Medieval England could produce carnage that matched the Western Front. Think about what Towton did to England's collective psyche. 1% of the male population. Gone in 6 hours. Families wiped out. Entire bloodlines ended. Villages that sent their men never saw them return. This wasn't just a battle, it was a national trauma, the kind that echoes through generations, shapes how people think about war, power, survival. The Tudors inherited a kingdom scarred by what happened in that field. By the 1500s, Towton had become shorthand for absolute horror. Writers used it like we use Hiroshima or 9/11s. Thomas Mallory working on his Arthurian legends. He's thinking about Towton when he writes about battlefields strewn with the dead. Shakespeare crafting his history plays, Towton's shadow falls across every scene of royal ambition and civil war. The battle became England's nightmare reference point. Here's something miraculous. That battlefield? It's largely untouched. No shopping malls, no housing estates, no industrial development. The Towton field looks almost exactly like it did in 1461. Rolling Yorkshire countryside, ancient hedgerows, the same view those soldiers had before the arrows started flying. It's like stepping into a time capsule, a preserved monument to medieval warfare that most people walk past without knowing. The archaeology keeps revealing secrets. Every year, metal detectors find something new. Belt fittings, spearheads, coins clutched in skeletal hands. Each artifact tells part of the story. A broken sword blade speaks of desperate close combat. A crushed helmet shows the force of medieval weapons. These aren't museum pieces, they're evidence from history's crime scene. Physical proof of what humans can do to each other. Those handgun fragments I mentioned earlier, they're some of the earliest firearms evidence in Northern Europe. Towton wasn't just medieval, it was transitional. Old world meeting new. Longbows firing alongside primitive guns. Knights in armour facing early gunpowder weapons. The battle marked a turning point in military technology. Death was modernising, even in 1461. The future was announcing itself with smoke and lead. The mass graves tell their own story. Archaeologists have found burial pits packed with skeletons. Men buried hastily, without ceremony, some still wearing fragments of their armour, others stripped clean by scavengers. The bones show trauma patterns, crushed skulls, severed limbs, defensive wounds on hands and arms. These men died fighting. They died hard, and they were buried like livestock. Most people know Hastings. 1066, Norman conquest, taught in every British school, but Towton barely mentioned. And that's insane, because Towton was bigger, deadlier, more decisive. It secured the Yorkist claim that eventually led to the Tudors. It changed English history more dramatically than Hastings. Yet it remains this forgotten horror, this overlooked catastrophe that shaped everything that came after. The battle seeped into English culture in subtle ways. Folk songs about lost loves who never returned from Yorkshire. Local legends about ghostly armies marching across frozen fields. Church records documenting mass requiem services. Even the landscape carries scars, field names like Bloody Meadow and Dead Man's Bottom. The vocabulary of trauma embedded in the countryside itself. Today, there's a small monument, a modest stone cross marking where so many fell. Battlefield preservation groups work to keep developers away. History buffs make pilgrimages. Metal detecting clubs organise digs. It's this quiet, ongoing effort to remember something most of the world has forgotten. A stubborn refusal to let Towton disappear completely. These people understand that some stories demand to be told. Stand in that field on a March morning when the wind picks up. Close your eyes. You can almost hear it, the whistle of arrows, the crash of steel, the cries of wounded men calling for their mothers, or maybe that's just your imagination, filling the silence with ghosts. Either way, the land remembers. Some places hold their history like a wound that never quite heals. What Towton teaches us is uncomfortable. We like to think warfare became truly brutal with modern technology, machine guns, artillery, chemical weapons, but the capacity for mass killing, that's been with us forever. Medieval England could produce industrial-scale death without any industry at all. Just human fury, just political ambition, just the same tribal hatreds that drive conflict today. So that's Towton, England's bloodiest day, a battle that killed more Britons than any other single engagement in British history. A turning point disguised as a footnote, a reminder that the past isn't some quaint, distant country where things were simpler. It was just as brutal as anything we've managed since. The echoes of those screams, they're still bouncing around, still teaching us who we really are.